Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my brand new cybersecurity channel Cyber Talks. So today I'm going to speak about how to mitigate from ransomware risk. Actually, this presentation is a continuation from my last presentation where I explained about what makes the companies to pay the ransom and what's the root cause behind the sudden spike in ransomware attacks. So in today's topic, I have been really concerning about the people and the technology factor, and using this people and technology factor, how we can mitigate the ransomware risk. So before taking a further time, just move on to my first slide. So the preparation. So guys, this preparation is the first and foremost thing. So like in any other cyber security attack, if you are not going to face it properly, if you are not prepared enough, so the first step is to create your contact list and to keep it up to date, right? That means you need to know your organization's incident response team and any other external and internal stakeholders. Not only are limited to the law enforcement and insurance carrier or any other emergency people, but you but the a bottom line is, because in kind of a incident, you have just a matter of a few minutes or rather hours to a response. So having this information up to date means that you need not to waste your time on finding this information, so that can itself can reduce the incident or response time. So that's the biggest reason that we say to maintain an up-to-date contact list and to keep an understanding about your incident response team and the law enforcement people and other specific people that you want to contact with. So a second point is to consider cyber security insurance. So this is one of the hot topics these days, because many insurance companies who basically offers coverages for the ransomware now reaching many other companies who are just willing to take the cyber security insurance. So what they basically do is they just perform a prior screening, like a risk assessment. They just identify what sort of risk can trigger the ransomware attacks and what kind of impacts quantitatively and qualitatively can affect the business, and what sort of controls that they have currently in place to rather prevent or mitigate this a risk. So based on those information, they actually come up with an adequate coverage. So it is important for an organization to go for this cyber security insurance, which includes this uh, ransomware attacks as well, especially. So the third one is to hire a ransomware a negotiator. So this ransomware a negotiator, as I explained in my previous presentation, can help in case if your organization opted to pay the ransom. If your organization decides that paying the ransom is the best way to go on, and they can just appoint or they can just hire a person for that, and who, who can have a good communication skills, and he or she can basically negotiate with the attacker and just to reduce the payments by a considerable amount of time. And in my previous presentation, I also produced few examples for that as well. So it's up to you, it's up to the organization whether to pay the ransom or not, right? the fourth the fourth point is to acquire the cryptocurrency. So this is another a facet of facing or rather encountering ransomware attacks. So rather than rather than just buying cryptocurrency, right, in exchange of the hard cash or your company finances. It is important if you can maintain a kind of a crypto wallet early in your stage. So in case if you are getting victimized, you can utilize those cryptocurrency instead of your company cash to buy the a cryptocurrency. So that has been a good ploy, because because it can not only uh, preserve the your company finances, but it also helps to just reduce the incident response time, because when you're going to buy the currencies, and if they are rated very high, it would be very disheartened, and it would be very problematic for your organization to make the ransom and to settle the ransom rather. Okay. And the fifth point is to establish a policy, right? So listing down all these factors and at what levels, at what conditions these things are, such as paying the ransom or not to paying the ransom, going for a cyber security insurance, and all this stuff should be very well defined in our information security policy or any sort of an incident response or a BCP policy. So this can be are really developed under the supervision of an expertise such as an cyber insurance carrier or one of your information security professional. So this is like the core of your entire response procedure to the ransomware attacks, right? Attacks. Because if you don't have the policy in place, so rest of the things you cannot expect them to follow the way that you are expecting to go, right? So having the policy is the first and foremost thing, right? So it defines actually what is expected from you as users and as incident response team and as a legal parties and etc. So it need to be well defined. So these 5 points actually, according to my point of view, would come into play when we are encountering a cyber security attack or any a ransomware attack. So this is very much tailored to the ransomware attack. So it is come in handy when you are facing a ransomware attack. So these are the few law authorities that you can file a complaint. Of course, if you are living in a USA, it is very easy for you to file a complaint. You have FBI and many local officers allocated by the states of uh, your country, so which would be very easy for you to file a complaint. And and earlier in my presentation, I said that that I'm talking about people and technologies. So people is the first and foremost thing, because still most of our organizations are not 100% human free, or they are not 100% based on machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? They still want those officers or those white collar professionals to do a certain jobs, right? So that's why it is important to invest in a human firewall, or rather in employees, right? Because at one point a security geeks have identified that employees are the biggest or the weakest link of failure in this entire cybersecurity chain, right? So why not we invest them, like providing them some regular awareness trainings, and when it comes to the ransomware attacks, it's very important to perform some simulation testings, right? Mainly these ransomware attacks would come from these phishing links. So it is very important if we can perform some phishing drills for the employees annually at least, so which would give some understanding and some awareness and some eye opening for the employees, right? So next I will explain about the technologies that we can use to prevent the initially a foothold. So here what I have mentioned is to prevent the entry of an attack from our perimeter. So in this thing, what I'm trying to explain is how to reinforce our security perimeter. So in here I have explained about five to six technologies. The first one is based on the risk-based vulnerability management. Actually, this risk-based vulnerability management is one of the top five futuristic technologies according to the Gartner chart. So it says that rather than performing vulnerability assessments vaguely and for the entire set of assets in your company, it's important to focus them on the most critical and the highest risk rated assets, right? So you can actually minimize that a fatigue of remediating some huge number of vulnerabilities, and it will also reduce this enormous effort of patching, right? So that would also help to actually to make this your attack surface would get more focused on your critical assets. So that's why it has mentioned as the risk based. So the one of the most important thing that you have to keep in mind when come with this VM is you have to continuously analyze or scan your network, because these risk or these priorities might be changed from time to time. So you need to get updated with these things. And of course the our next point is to patch management. So this patch management can be handled and managed very much easier if you have a better vulnerability management. So the third point is the browser isolation. So in this browser isolation, what we mainly talk about is when there is any kind of a foreign process execution which you cannot understand whether it is a malicious one or not, you can actually isolate that, so that it is more or less like a sandboxing, right? That means you have a separate environment which is different from your production or your live environment. It is just like a quarantine environment, so where you can monitor the behavior of these processes. That means for an example, with what sort of outside connections that particular process is going to make, and based on that behavior, so you can either whitelist that process in your future connections, or you can just spam it down. So it is very important, this technology, in order to prevent the initial entry of any sort of attack. And the fourth one is to the endpoint deception and or honeypots. Actually, this also comes in handy, like in the tools like Maze Runner. So where you can actually deploy a decoy, right, which is very similar to your current environment, so that the attacker doesn't feel any difference, right? So this environment can be used to perform threat hunting and to actually identify what sort of attacks are evolving around a network, right? And the fourth one is an endpoint protection platform, and the EDR. Actually, that is something far beyond from our traditional antivirus tools, and most of the most of them are nowadays automated, and they are machine learning. So you just need to identify your process and just to automate it, incident response process, and I just to automate it. And the final one, but not the least one, is the network access control. In this network access control, what basically happens is, before admitting or before committing any tool to your network, it performs a kind of a health check, right? So it actually check the hygiene or your devices, uh, 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 security hygiene. That means in terms of the patch level and the antivirus level, right? So based on that, if everything is on the right level, it will get automatically added to the network. So it is important to create the pre-admission policies for this as well. So these are the few technologies that we can use to prevent the initial entry of a ransomware attack to your network. And then let's identify what are the technologies to prevent from these kind of attacks. That means in case, let's say that you are getting, that means an attack has been already making the footholds to your network. It has been already entered to your network. So what sort of precautions or what sort of technologies are still there to prevent the containment, sorry, to prevent the lateral movement and to make the containment tough, strict, right? So the first and foremost thing is a zero trust network. That means you can create policies in between your VLANs and your network segments, right? So that that process, so if you can identify at what VLAN or at what particular host this malware or this ransomware attack is going on, so you can just isolate it from the entire network, right? Or you can perform, or you can imply some multi-factor authentication between the connections, right, of VLANs, right? So these things belong to actually the zero trust network access. And the next one is the privilege access management, which is very capable of performing a session recording and whitelisting any kind of scripts that are going to run on your system. So it would help if you can just configure these kind of scripts can only run by the admin, and any other scripts cannot be run and should be blacklisted. So in case if your ransomware started to perform some malicious activities, that would get automatically blocked, right? So it is very much like the application whitelisting. So privilege access management can do not only that, but it's not its main functionality, but still it can prevent those kind of malicious processors and those foreign processors running in your endpoint. And the other one is the network deception, which we also discussed in the previous thing. It can also employ it for lateral movement, because the attacker would not have any sort of an idea that he is whether in the live environment or an kind of a decoy environment, right? And the other thing is to create a network behavior analysis, which is equivalent to the user and entity behavior analytics, and also the data loss prevention. DLP tools is also important to prevent any data exfiltration, to prevent any sensitive data exfiltration from your network. So these kind of technologies, actually, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but still it would come in handy when you want to prevent the lateral movement of these attacks. So at last but not least, your all traditional backup would come in handy. So please make a note that everything you do should have a backup, whether it is an online backup or a regular backups that you are taking monthly, daily, or weekly. Please stick on to that and also perform these backup restoration testing regularly. Please do that, because I have met many clients who haven't done backup or restoration testing, have failed their backups at the very crucial times when they want to restore their backups, right? So keep in mind to take the backups and also to follow all the steps which I have mentioned in my previous slides. So from these slides, I'm going to wind off today's session, and thanks a lot for listening. Thank you guys.